We're now live, Chair.
I think you're on mute, Councillor Evans.
Oh, thank you very much. That's a good start to the evening. So I shall say again, welcome everybody to the Strategy and Performance Scrutiny Board. And let's start with substitutes formally. What substitutes do we have, please?
Hi, Chair. Apologies have been received from Councillor Lee and Councillor Naeem, and we've got Councillors Monteith and Megan Swift substituting on their behalf.
Thank you very much. Let me remind members to declare any disclosable interests which they may have in relation to the agenda this evening, either now or as and when the items occur. Anything immediately? Nope. As and when then, please. Admission of the public. It's not recommended that the public be excluded from this meeting for the consideration of the items of business on this agenda, and in fact we are streaming anyway, so welcome to any members of the public who are joining us this evening. The first major item on the agenda is the minutes of the previous meeting of the 2nd of June 2021. In the first instance, does anybody have any comments to make in terms of omissions or corrections, please?
I think Councillor Metcalfe, Chair.
Bob, thank you. Bob, you've got one. Thank you.
It's not a correction or an omission. It's just a query on the where we agreed to submit have a report submitted on the council delivery of the 2021 elections to a future meeting of this board. I just know we discussed at the time, or I think it was mentioned at the time, whether this should all be a joint meeting with the Governance and Business Committee. So I'm not clear if we made a if that's going to be the case. And I know we can pick this up in the work programme. I know this will be slotted in when it's ready to come, but just querying whether it's going to be a joint one with the other committee.
Thank you. Can we pick that up in the work programme, Lauren, please? Unless you have an answer for us at the moment. Has it gone formally and it hasn't, has it? No. Okay, thank you for that, Bob. Anybody else? Any omissions or corrections? Don't think so. So would somebody like to propose those as a true representation of that meeting? Yes, thank you. Hands are up. And all those in favour of accepting the minutes, please. Thank you very much. So moving on to the substantive items on the agenda, the first item, number 5, is the Cabinet priorities for the year ahead. And I believe that our leader, Tim Swift, is going to give us the overview on this one. Tim, are you?
Yeah.
We've obviously had a very detailed report, but do you want to sort of just give us some headlines on it?
Yes, that's okay. Yeah. So as you'd expect, think on the year ahead, this year is still going to be dominated to some degree by the continuing impacts of the pandemic and the need to recover from that. And these priorities also bring in some of the actions that were identified in the COVID recovery plan that went to Cabinet back in late March, early April, I forget the exact date now, and bring those together. Clearly, it's still not certain how far things will return to whatever a new version of normal looks like. At the moment, we're in a position where, on the one hand, we have the obvious impact of the vaccination programme reducing the harm caused by COVID, but high and still rising case numbers causing a number of levels of concern. So I think it's clear that even post the summer, we will still be seeing the impact of COVID on many of our services and many of our activities. I think what COVID has also shown up, and what will make the recovery and the getting back to normal of many services challenging is the extent to which the last 10 or 11 years have reduced the surplus capacity within public services, and hence their flexibility and abilities to cope with any challenge. And that means once you load additional demands on them, then recovering and getting back to normal is extremely challenging. That will be most obvious perhaps in if you look outside of the council at the NHS and the impact that they'll be seeing going forward. But I think the reality is that we will see many impacts across so many of our services. So the plan we set out, though, doesn't simply look at recovering from COVID, important though that is. It looks at the need to continue to keep Calderdale safe and thriving against a range of challenges, the perennial risk of flooding perhaps being the second one that's always very much on our agenda. And it sets out a number of immediate 6-monthly priorities over the next 6 months against the three broad themes that we've agreed as broad priorities for some time. That's building strong towns and communities, reducing inequalities, and addressing the climate emergency. When we presented this report to Cabinet, colleagues highlighted in particular a variety of different elements of them. So I think particularly important in terms of recovery will be the ways we're able to continue to support and work together with businesses, particularly perhaps tourism businesses, but also how we can help to build greater capacity in the local economy by making sure we target as much of our own investment and that of the combined authority and of our partners into local and regional businesses. We talked about the need to prioritise work with community organisations, and Cabinet next week will be looking at a number of exciting proposals for taking forward the running of some of the facilities identified through the Future Council programme. I think one of the biggest challenges in terms of recovering from COVID will be the support we need to give to our children, our young people and schools. I think we all recognise that the package of support announced by government is not going to address by any means all the pressures that schools are facing, and a number of different actions are set out in the priorities. In terms of the climate change, there's some exciting work being done by the Climate Change Working Party on what a realistic emission reductions pathway, that's what it is we really need to do to get emissions down to zero by 2038, which is a hugely challenging target. Some exciting work being done there, which we've been briefed on, and we'll be bringing that forward and the action plan linked to that later in the summer. That, of course, is one of the areas where what we do will be very much need to be aligned with what we do through the West Yorkshire Combined Authority and what the Mayor of West Yorkshire does. And I'm quite pleased to be playing a role in that at West Yorkshire level, as well as chair of the West Yorkshire Environment Committee. And finally, I want to highlight, we want to continue to push forward and make progress on making Calderdale an age-friendly and a dementia-friendly borough. This was, I know, something Bob was keen on. Some work, we've done quite a lot of work on this. It was also flagged up in Paul Butcher's last report as Director of Public Health before he left. And of course, taking that work forward rather got lost for a while inevitably with COVID. So we're very keen to see that and pick that up, recognising that the challenges of supportive community with demographic change and older population is not just about care, it's about people who want to remain fit and active into their 70s and 80s, and the kind of very different demands that makes on us as a community, but also the different opportunities it offers with people with time and sometimes resources to contribute to the communities in very different ways. So I think, Ashley, there's obviously quite a lot of detail in the document itself, but if I pause there and we take questions and comments, I'm sure Councillor Scullion will bail me out if I get anything wrong. So between us, hopefully we can pick up most of the issues people want to talk about.
I guess that might be why Jane was with us this evening to help in that one. So welcome, Jane. Yes, as you say, Tim, it is a very detailed report, and my first reaction on reading it myself was that there is a huge amount of ideas, thoughts which are coming through in this, and you're setting yourself some very significant tasks to achieve here, quite understandably and quite rightly. And there is a tremendous amount of detail, as you've indicated. But as far as members of the board are concerned, any questions or comments at this stage, please?
I think Councillor Press is indicating, Chair.
Thank you. Yes, Susan, please. You're still on mute, I think, Susan.
Sorry, don't know what happened there. I do say you'd have thought I'd be used to it by now, but for some reason it's
swearing about the buttons and then find yourself off mute.
Yeah, and with Teams, I'm doing more Teams meetings, so we've got different buttons. So, yeah. I was just wondering, following on, I think, from a conversation we had a while ago. I noted on the bullet points, it says grow income, e.g. financial priorities, sorry, right at the end. And it mentions a housing plan. Could either the leader or deputy elaborate on this? Because obviously housing has been one of those issues where we need to do better.
Absolutely, yeah. Good question. Who wants to come back on that one?
I'll pass that one to Jane, if that's okay.
Jane, over to you, Jane.
Thank you. And it may be worth having the individual directors or the portfolio holders for a deeper dive into some of the issues that are in here, because I think the question of our strategic approach to housing is one that Sheila O'Neill, the new director, is really got the bit between her teeth. And she is working with English Partnerships, which is I think a quasi-governmental organisation, and also with the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, particularly around the new Unlocking and Brownfield Fund, to see what the opportunities are for Calderdale. Because one of the things we know is that from housing, other benefits lead, not simply that you get the new homes bonus, but also that you get Section 106 or community infrastructure levy money, SIL money, to do other things like refurbish playgrounds or develop new community amenities in an area. But also it means that we get council tax. I think as importantly, it means that shops and communities have people using their services. And in addition, our schools actually have children to keep them open. That's a particular issue in the Upper Valley, where often the smaller schools find that as houses get more expensive and no new housing is built, that their role begins to decline. So we know that housing, but the right housing, is important for us. One of the things that Sheila O'Neill, as the director, is looking at is the particular challenges of Calderdale in relation to relatively small scale development. Clearly there's a local plan, and there will be over the next 15 years the releasing of various sites that previously weren't available. But nonetheless, we still have overall across the borough a whole set of small sites, and they fall below the government's cut-off point in terms of unlocking money. We know we have a lot of sites where access is a real problem. Highways need to be widened and so on. They're all pack horse roads, etc. We have a number of sites because of an industrial heritage where the sites need to be remediated because there's heavy metal and other things. And we also have the flooding issue. And Sheila is looking at ways in which we can put together for Calderdale a particular case around the type of borough that we are, whether we could group some of these possible sites together and make a case to government for that unlocking that brownfield, that difficult sites money, in order to really try and increase the volume and indeed the pace of housing development in the borough. And it may be that you want to spend, the housing staff are working on a new housing strategy at the moment. So it may be that you want to take a look at some of the strategies around the regeneration area that are going to be forthcoming as the Strategy and Performance Committee.
Absolutely. I think we wouldn't disagree with you at all on that one, Jane. I think the other issue that which strikes me, particularly we're mentioning housing there, is the effect it has on other things. So this housing affects the schooling side of things. It affects the climate emergency thing in terms of the properties. It affects all sorts of other issues and traffic and so on. So many of these issues in this report are actually interlinked in many ways, and I think that's something that we're going to have to take account of as well. But anybody else who's got any questions at this stage?
I think Councillor Metcalfe raised
yes,
his hand,
Dan?
Chair.
Yeah, Dan?
I think Bob's been waiting quite patiently, Chair.
Oh,
so
sorry.
I would prefer to defer to him if that's
I
fine.
can't ignore my co-chair, can I? My deputy chair. But are you giving way to Bob then at this point? Okay, Bob, fire away. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, thanks. I'd have waited, but thank you. I just wanted to mention about reducing inequalities. I know it's on the plan, on the report. There's one flagged item about delivering against our BAME review plan, equalities and inclusion and future leadership roles, which I've read what that will become a more diverse council by. I just wanted to widen that, and really I'm jumping outside these reports, but I was pretty shocked a short while ago when I read the front page of The Guardian today, and there's a shocking report which they've put in of how many members have seen the paper today at all, but from Sir Michael Marmot, the public health expert, it's really saying that ministers' ambition to level up regional differences are being criticised for being over-reliant on large economic infrastructure projects. His proposals, Marmot's proposals, suggest the focus should be widened to address the social conditions that cause inequalities at community level. It puts some pretty difficult things to swallow in here about how the declining life expectancies and deteriorating social conditions in certain parts of different authorities are around the country. And I just wondered if I could just ask Councillor Swift and Councillor Scullin, if we're going to widen perhaps on this area, perhaps not just in this report, and I know Health and Wellbeing Board will be looking at, obviously they'll be looking at it, and I don't want to just pop it out of the blue onto Tim and Jane, but I just thought, seeing it's been out there today, this quite difficult, very, very serious report, just what kind of action we might be thinking of planning further on this, on top of the work we're already doing. I'm not suggesting perhaps it's something for this board, but there may be elements of it that we can look into ourselves further as well.
Yeah, good point, Bob. Jane, Tim, come back on that one, please.
Yeah, thanks. So yes, I've been reading the press coverage of the Marmot report, and want to have a look at the summary of the report itself. Of course, Michael Marmot has done a lot of work on health inequalities and been very robust in making that clear link between wider living conditions and health inequalities. It's something I'm really passionate about, and from my work as chair of the West Yorkshire and Harrogate Health Partnership, the initial work that was done, particularly on Black and minority ethnic inequalities, that was commissioned by the partnership because we saw those impacts so clearly in the in the first wave of COVID, where it was obvious that people from particular communities were being disproportionately affected. But we've always recognised that is only one strand to a wider issue, and that actually, if we want to deliver on our ambitions of most people enjoying a better health, and not just better life expectancy, but also if you look at people's expectancy in terms of years of healthy life, in fact, the discrepancies there between the most affluent and least affluent areas are in some ways even more marked. Then that is why you need a partnership approach that recognises the contribution of things like housing and employment and income, as well as the direct health thing. So definitely very keen to pick up and extend on that. I think, particularly looking forward, given that, again, it is likely that COVID will worsen some of those inequalities and affect some people's access to employment as well. I think the agenda around skills and access to decent jobs for people is a critical part of that, and I'm very keen to see how we can do that. And actually, I feel particularly in times of health and care, to some extent, there's an opportunity there to mix the two problems, because on the one hand, we've got the NHS facing a huge workforce crisis, and on the other hand, we've got areas in our borough where people are desperate to access better jobs and need the training and support to get them into those jobs. And we should be encouraging people like the Trust to work much more closely with us in some of those communities to help and support people into jobs. And I know actually they are starting to do that in one or two areas, but I think there's much more we can do to directly link both a solution and a problem. But I absolutely agree with you, Bob.
Thank you. I've got Dan and Jacob. I've actually noticed your yellow hand, Jacob, so I'll be back to you once I've gone to Dan. Dan, do you want to come in now, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My original question was going to be about how we make sure that the recovery reaches into all the areas of Calderdale, taking into consideration the national focus on big infrastructure projects. But I think Tim's very well responded about the sort of the soft things, which I think come as part of an economic recovery in terms of skills, but also things such as housing. So I'll come to my other question, which might lead on quite well, which was about the opportunities that we have from a mayor in post. And what are the primary opportunities that we see about having a mayor that we can work with, and how do they link into the priorities we've got? What are the opportunities that we want to be keeping on our horizon over the next 6 months and a year with this changing landscape?
Who would you like to answer that?
I'll start again if that's okay. But James,
okay, Tim, you're fine.
So, I mean, many and various. The most obvious ones at a West Yorkshire level are twofold. It's more money and more flexibility about how the money is spent. So the headline figure obviously is the extra £38 million a year of mayoral growth money, which wasn't available before. Now, obviously, that's across the whole of West Yorkshire, and we may need to make sure we get the benefit of our share of that. But the evidence is also that mayoral authorities tend to do better at getting slices of other funds that come in. And definitely we also get more flexibility on some of the funds that are there. So there's more opportunity, not just to make sure Calderdale gets its share of those, but to make sure that when we do, we can try to make sure it's used on schemes that align more closely with our priorities. And I think so far, if you look at the mayor's 10 pledges and 10 priorities, many of those fit pretty well with ours as well. And she certainly, she's already shown a very keen interest in working with us on some of the environmental issues. She understands and reflects the real challenges we face in terms of flooding, and is quite enthusiastic about some of the really different things we want to do. That it's not just about flood walls, it's about natural flood management and things that impact across the whole area. And the other thing, of course, I'd say in a big way, although it'll take time to deliver the benefits, is around buses and how we can improve the buses. And Dan will be aware that we made a commitment in principle last week to start the work of exploring a shift towards franchising. That's not going to be a quick process, and it's one the bus companies will no doubt resist, but I believe if we want to have the opportunity to invest more in the buses and to make sure that that money then goes on providing the kind of bus network that supports everyone, rather than one that, you know, competes heavily in some areas and leaves other areas underprovided for, then franchising is essential. And it's a key part both of opportunities for people in areas with lower car ownership, but also, of course, of addressing the climate agenda, because we can only do that if we reduce the reliance on private cars.
Thank you. Jacob, did you want to come in now?
Yes. Hi, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to return to the topic of the climate emergency. Just really wanted to ask about that. What specific measures will be taken towards achieving net zero? But I wanted to ask particularly how there will be a plan to balance an increase in the housing that's going to take place across the borough with the climate emergency, because house building necessarily brings an increase in carbon emissions, because every home obviously emits carbon. You know, even if you do your very best to make it a renewable energy sources that power the homes, they still do emit carbon. So I wondered how the council was planning to balance the climate emergency against the number of homes to be built across the borough. Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tim and Jane?
I think Jane was volunteering for that one. So.
Yeah.
Thank you. And it's a great question, Councillor Cook, actually. And it's one that does stretch the mind. And it's something that has come up during the local plan examination by the planning inspector. And of course, many of the houses that we have already, existing houses, are not especially energy efficient houses. So there's a great deal to do in terms of refurbishing the existing stock and bringing that up to quality that it needs to be. And of course, new housing will inevitably be of a better quality than much of our old cold stone housing that we've got. Let me take the first part of your question first, though. You asked about the climate emergency work generally, and it's in very, very small letters within that overall report, but there's a mention of an emissions reduction pathway report. And it does actually, I think, contain the beginnings of plain language about how do we get from A to B, and what are the other dependencies and contextual things that we need to take into account, because some of it's complicated. And the emissions pathways report, I think, begins to set out year by year what the council can do, what is dependent on national government, and also the beginnings of the context, as Councillor Swift said, in terms of what can be done in terms of the mayoral funds that are available. In terms of the overall question about housing, in some ways you could infer from, you know, the environmental implications of building anything, employment premises or housing, that we should just stop. We should just stop entirely. We should try and refurbish what we've got. That doesn't take into account the fact that our sons and daughters and our grandchildren many of them would like to live in Calderdale, and indeed post-lockdown, many people from elsewhere would also like to live in Calderdale and help to bring our towns and our villages to life. I think the other thing is, of course, that the government requires us to put forward plans for how we are actually going to meet the demand for housing. And we do have to do those calculations and provide the government with satisfaction that we will actually provide, with partners, with developers, with housing associations, the right amount of housing that the government requires us to do. But you're absolutely right, it does require really a whole series of complex calculations, and we're still working on it. But I really commend the emissions reduction pathway, I've got those words in the wrong order, that is recently, I think it's just about to come out, if it isn't out already, in terms of just beginning to say year by year what the council will do, what the sequences are and what the dependencies are. And I think it does address some of those underlying complexities. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Jacob, do you want to come back on any of that, or
No,
you're comfortable?
that's fine. Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions around the group? I'll put my 10 in, if I may. I started off by saying that I thought there was lots of good stuff in here and lots of detail and lots of plans and ideas. One of my hobby horses when we're doing this sort of thing is not necessarily to sort of disagree with any of the things. I think there's some very important and exceptionally good things to come out of this. My concerns are the sort of three basic questions in any planning operation: how, what, and when, and funding. And I'm also aware that we have already suggested that this report may come back to us probably, I don't know, autumn time, 6 months time or whatever, within the time frame. If we are going to review how things have gone, then we need to know what's going to happen by when and how it's going to happen. And clearly within the framework of this particular document, that's difficult to do, but I think we need that information. Tim, Jane, do you want to come back on that? Jane?
I mean, I'll come back on the first part. Say yes, definitely. I think we will probably take a progress report back to Cabinet towards the end of the 6 months, and certainly be very happy for that to come to scrutiny as well, because I think that's a really helpful discipline, and I'd expect that to set out where we made progress. I think if you remember when we did that in 2019 when we did the 100 days plan, I mean, we were pretty honest as well about what had been met and where there was shortcomings. I do acknowledge that probably some of the bullet points in this one are a little bit less specific than they were in the last 100 days plans. I think that does reflect the greater uncertainty still of where we are, but I agree it's helpful to make that as measurable as it can, and certainly we take that on board in the reporting back. But Jane tends to specialise on performance stuff, so I'll let her add on that one, if I may.
Councillor Evans is
the ball's
absolutely
coming in your court, Jane.
Absolutely, Councillor Evans is absolutely right. We did talk immediately before and after the election about 100 things to do in 100 days and all the gimmicks that we as politicians do when you take office for a new term, and we felt that would be artificial. And you'll see in the covering report that this is very much caveated. It's 6 months. We are not through the pandemic yet. We're moving into more of a recovery phase, but we're not through the pandemic yet. We're in a world of uncertain finance. We don't know what the autumn spending review, we don't even know when it will be yet, but we don't know what it's going to say, whether it's going to be a 1-year spending review for departments, or whether it's going to be 3 years and we can begin planning. And also we have got to think about our own staff in terms of capacity and the difficulty that they've had in all kinds of things, of different ways of working, IT, working at home, etc. So that there is a big caveat about this in a way that there wasn't perhaps back in May, June 2019. And it is important, I think, to be ambitious and to not necessarily, in spite of my interest in statistics and performance, you'll see in this that there is some softer language, which is about things like, for example, beginning the path of being an age-friendly borough. That's not something you do in 6 months, but it's something, I think it's very legitimate for you to hold us to account in terms of you're on the path. Where are you on the path to making Calderdale an age-friendly borough? Where are you, administration, on finding new ways of engaging with people with disabilities and their families, and talking with them in new ways about how we might develop our services in the future? Now that's very hard to measure, but I think that's a useful conversation and debate, and very reasonable for you to ask those searching questions about where we are on each of those things. Some of them will be complete and some of them won't be complete. but we're very prepared to be accountable on all of those. But we are still in a pandemic and indeed a financially very difficult period. So we hope that at the end of 6 months, a bit of flex on your part might be possible.
I'm sure that we can allow flex. I just think we need to know what a little bit more specifically what's intended and how it's going to be achieved. So I think a bit more meat on the bones of this document, which looks very impressive in itself, but I think we need a bit more meat on there. One other thing I would say is that I think that we need to, I don't know quite how we do this, but I think we need to try and get some cross-party involvement in this. I think we need to involve other members of council, other members in these things and development, if only from the point of view that not teaching you to, or not attempting to teach you to suck eggs, but if people are a part of the decision, they will go along with you. And I think that it would be useful if there is some way that we can look at where we involve the broader spectrum of councillors in terms of some of these decisions and how it's going and how it's developing. And I would urge Cabinet to look at that approach and see what they can do in those areas. And it has already been hinted at that there will be certain elements within this plan which are specific to certain scrutiny panels. There's some very obvious CYP elements in here, and I think it will be useful. And who am I to suggest to other chairs that it goes to their scrutiny committees? But I think that's something we as chairs of scrutiny should be looking at and building into the work programmes. So that's my little diatribe. Susan, did you want to come back on that? Have I missed anybody else?
Yeah, sorry, if nobody else, just very quickly. Yeah, I take your point, Councillor Evans, but if we're looking at something, like, for example, the local plan and the housing allocations contained in that, they were the result of so much consultation. So we don't really need to reinvent the wheel. What we kind of need to do is make sure, as a scrutiny panel, we are holding things to account, but maybe also place scrutiny did a bit of work on inequalities and I think it was Councillor Kavanagh who did a lot with a questionnaire. So I'm all for scrutiny maybe up in its game and not just being there to ask awkward questions, but actually put something together. So maybe that is something that I don't think we need additional structures. I think within this scrutiny panel we could perhaps work together and come up with some thoughts on housing and developing and improving things. So I don't know how other people feel about that. I mean, I think we've got all the we've got all the nuts and bolts in place here, really. Don't need to do anything new.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. I would just like to be sure that we do involve a wide spectrum of people in these decisions, and not necessarily even just in scrutiny. There are other routes to this as well. I would just make that general observation. Anybody else got any further comments to make on this particular agenda item? Can't see any other hands. So can I thank Tim and Jane in terms of the presentation there, and hopefully we'll look forward to seeing you again in a few months' time, and good luck with everything. So thank you very much. Okay.
Other items.
Sorry, there is one other point that I did want to ask. There's some reference towards the end of the report in relation to digital democracy, and I wondered how far we'd got with that particular one so far. Is there something that you can update us on that one? It seemed to a particular area that you were focusing in on the report, and it doesn't seem to have come up in the conversation so far.
Chair, this was it's part of the recovery plan post-pandemic, if I dare say that, and it's partly due to the experience for children and young people in terms of having to do their learning online, and who knows, in terms of specific outbreaks and so on, we may have periods in the future, if there's return off the COVID virus, that we may have periods when parents and children have to work at home. One of the things that the Task and Finish group that did a short review on the effects of the pandemic and inequalities that Councillor Press mentioned earlier. And I think it was Councillor Robinson and Councillor Roisin Kavanagh who were primarily involved in that. They particularly raised the question of digital inequalities, particularly around children and larger households. You know, when there's maybe just a mobile phone and everybody's trying to work or educate themselves using that. But I can't actually speak about the detail of that because Councillor Sylvia Dacre has the portfolio, and she is, I'm pleased to say, on holiday at the moment. But it may well be, and very much within the remit of this committee in terms of strategy and performance, perhaps to ask for a more detailed report in terms of the question of digital democracy, because there are also wider aspects of that. But it is Councillor Dacre's portfolio.
Okay, understood. Thank you. It's just a note that I've made, and I thought it was worth raising at this point, and it may well come up in future board meetings. So thank you for that.
Perhaps just sorry.
No, sorry, Tim. Yes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, perhaps if we just add, Ashley, there's probably a few things people want to think about in that as well. You know, so practically, as you'll be aware, there are some meetings we're now having to hold physically, and we wait to see what happens with changing regulations after the 19th of July, and there'll clearly be decisions to take then about the further balance. You know, but there are many of the meetings like working parties and ward forums and so on, where really it's much down to us where we want to have, and I guess experiences have been mixed. There's clearly been people who attended ward forums physically who have not been able to participate when they've been online, but equally, you know, certainly my limited experience of ones in our ward is there's been people attending them online who were not attending them physically. So, you know, examples like that, there are probably a case for us being more flexible about what we do. There are other tools. We were starting to look at different ways we could use online consultations and things, again, before COVID, and some of that work has been a bit lost. So I think there's, you know, I think it is a good topic that for you to have a future meeting on, although recognising some of that, again, probably will go to governance and business as well if we're looking for formal changes in how we do things.
Yeah, well, I'm sure Lauren's made a note of that one as a possible one for us. So thank you for that. We'll move on, shall we, to the item 6, which is customer services priorities for the year ahead. Is it Sarah Richardson? Are you?
I'm here. Yes.
Yes, good. Yes, there you are.
Thank you.
Do you want to again give us the headlines on this one, please?
Absolutely, yes. So first of all, just want to introduce myself. I'm Sarah Richardson, the Assistant Director for Customer Services based within Public Services Directorate. Now, my customer service remit is really quite wide. It covers a lot of different service areas, all of which I'm more than happy to come and talk to you at great length about in the future if you'd like to. But this evening, we're going to focus in on our frontline customer service. So our face-to-face, our telephony and our online presence. And I've brought Tony Kershaw with me today, who's our Customer Access Manager, who manages that particular service area. We have a few slides to work through with you. And I've asked Lauren if she will run the slideshow, and Tony will be Chris Whitty for you this evening. And keep asking for next slide, please. And we'll see
not to chase him around.
So any questions you've got, please just fire away at the end. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Can everybody see that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, great.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Great stuff, thank you. So thanks, Sarah. As Sarah said, I'm Tony Kershaw and I'm the Customer Access Manager, and tonight I'm going to be giving you an update on the demand on our frontline teams, and it's mainly focused around what's changed since March 2020 and how we're focusing on specific priorities to improve the service, the customer experience and the mental well-being of our teams, which is equally as important. Next slide, please, Lauren. So as you can see, there's quite a few stats coming up on these pages, so I'll I won't cover them all. I'll just give you some of the highlights, and if we need to go over any, then we can do. But as you can see, in 2019, 2020, the service level, which is the number of calls answered against the number of calls offered to us, was at an acceptable level. We usually say between 70 and 80% is around acceptable, in line with the national standards. And the average call length was fine, and as was the wait time that customers were waiting to be answered. So this is specifically around telephony. Between March 2020 and November 2020, the calls were manageable, and we were able to answer a reasonable number without keeping customers waiting too long. And we noticed a marked change, perhaps when the third lockdown was introduced, and so specifically around November 2020. Next slide, please, Lauren. So the time that it's taking customers to be answered is a particular concern to us and to members. I know that you have been contacted by residents who have been struggling to get through at times, and there's some reasons. Well, there's many reasons that the wait times have increased significantly. Demand has increased across queues where calls are more challenging, meaning that customers are waiting longer to be answered. The average call length has increased due to customers experiencing far more complex issues than before, such as financial hardship, social isolation, and mental health problems. We've had some people, some advisors leave the team, people going off on maternity, and that's left the team with gaps in experience and skills. And as you can imagine, recruitment and training while working remotely has been quite challenging. We've had some of our resource diverted to support other critical areas, such as the COVID support helpline. And remote working just means that by its very nature, it's more difficult for the team to get peer and team leader support when customers have difficult queries. So clearly in an office environment, they might just put their hands up or just confer with a colleague, and remote working just presents some challenges around that. That's just some of the reasons. There's other reasons, such as, remote working brings with it internet and ICT problems. There's been childcare problems where children are persistently being asked to stay at home and self-isolate, meaning that the team are finding it difficult to obviously work and look after their children and do homeschooling. And one that's is a quite significant one for us is that there has been increased demand in back offices, preventing them from responding to customers in a reasonable timescale, and so therefore customers keep coming back to us for updates. Next slide, please, Lauren. So this slide highlights some of the peaks and troughs across the months. So I don't expect you to sort of read through it all, but I just wanted to go through some of the reasons, because we follow the activity quite closely, and look at the demand very closely, and we keep a record of sort of key activities that are happening through the year, so we can reflect on those. So, for example, in October last year, we sent 3,500 summonses out for council tax, and that was right at the end of October during half term, which would be when we would have staff off on annual leave. So as you can imagine, that was a quite challenging period for us. In November, there were more grants announced from central government, so we got an increase in calls for business rates. In January and February, we had severe snow disruptions, which meant that waste and recycling was affected. During that time, we'd also sent out thousands of letters to the clinically extremely vulnerable and shielding residents, offering support there. We had the A641 consultation, which ended up in a lot of contact, and we did a double council tax reminder run. So all of these things you can see impact on the demand and cause these peaks and troughs. In March, we sent out 15,000 letters to people advising them that they don't have to shield anymore, but that we would still have support for them. And naturally, we started to see an increase in council tax because it was annual billing. So there's significant peaks and troughs, not only across the different queues, but across the same queues in different months. So I'll use January 21 versus January 20 as an example of where you can see that, you know, it's quite varied, and with the limited number of resources that we have, sometimes it's very difficult to cope with that additional demand. Next slide, please, Lauren. We've also had a real increase in emails. So just briefly on this slide, as you can see, there's some months that I've just presented some months to you for 19, April, May and June, where you can see that the levels were sort of manageable for us. And we've done a lot of work on reducing emails into us and tried to structure those interactions in different ways. And you can clearly see that from April, May and June in 2020, those had really increased, and we're still not back down to anything that's anywhere near manageable or what we would refer to as business as usual. The emails are mainly people chasing progress because they've already contacted us and not heard anything. We've also had issues with waste collections, and that's something that does invite high numbers of emails. So, you know, it's fair to say that whilst most waste collections take place without any issues, residents' expectations for this service are really high, and, you know, any issues just result in contact. We've had to limit the number of bulkies, for example, limit the number of containers that we can deliver. So all that increases contact. And council tax emails are particularly high. That won't come as a surprise to anyone. Many customers experiencing financial hardship for the first time. And that, you know, we're having customers contact us now that have never had to before. So they want us to help them with making arrangements to pay and help them through that, you know, that time that they're having where they are experiencing difficulty. So, you know, we're yet to see that email contact go back to what we would call business as usual levels. Next slide, please, Lauren. So I just wanted to talk about online because, you know, that before the pandemic, that was the preference for customer contact. And we've seen throughout the pandemic that theme has continued. So I won't go through all the bullet points on there, but 46% of customers are using e-forms rather than phoning and emailing, which is a great number for us. And there's been a lot of effort from various teams to increase the number of offline forms that we can offer to customers. We've also got the improved forms. So recently we've had fly tipping and street lighting. These are examples of where we've improved the form. The customer experience is much better, and the duplication in the back office has been massively reduced. So there's benefits all around there. We've also developed an in-house benefits claim form, which again has been better for the customer. It's got improved automation for the back office, and has also saved us a significant amount of money by not having to outsource that. We've had 10 million views on our web pages, which is huge, up 8% on the previous year. So you might be interested to know that the two top visited pages are the waste container page, so specifically how can I order waste containers, and followed by the council tax account page. And we saw 30% increases in those on the previous year. Clearly, we'd got new pages, so there's a lot of pages on the website around COVID support and what customers can expect and what we can offer. And we've seen huge numbers of people visiting the website to find out what we can offer them, which has been great. And then you know, we just basically have seen increases against previous years across all the online activities that we do. Next slide, please, Lauren. So I just thought I'd touch briefly on the number of formal complaints that we've had. So just to make you aware, we have a one-stage complaints process for adult health and social care and the corporate complaints, and a statutory 3-stage process for children's social care. And as you can see, the figures for last year were reduced again across corporate and adults, and it's looking very much a similar story for year. Next slide, please, Lauren. So this slide just shows a further breakdown by directorate, and basically overall it's a positive story. I don't want to go into too much detail about these because we do produce annual reports that are presented at Scrutiny and will be later on in the year. But it's, in terms of formal complaints, when you look at the number of transactions that we have with people overall, it's a really positive picture. As well as complaints, when we do present the report, we will also go through compliments that we receive. And we do receive hundreds and hundreds throughout the year, and that wasn't any different last year. We've received many, many compliments from people that are really grateful for the service and the help that they've received. So that more details of that will come out at the various scrutiny boards when they're presented. Next slide, please, Lauren. So just in terms of what our frontline teams are doing to improve customer focus, we recently presented a report on customer focus to CLT, and we've agreed the following 5 priorities. So I'll just go through them and then give you some examples of what we're already doing and what we're planning to do in terms of those priorities. So the first one's around taking ownership. So we want to really empower the teams with knowledge, and we're going to be doing that through upskilling, so getting people trained on other services, by having service liaison meetings with the back officers so we can exchange feedback, update each other on future plans, and have that confident communication that we can share with teams. And we can do call coaching, which is something that we've recently got some new technology which enables us to assist the team through coaching on calls. So that's been really positive. The next one is about us being easy to access, and we want customers to be able to do their business easily with us, and however they contact the council, we want to deliver great services. So we absolutely understand that even though face-to-face support was reducing prior to the pandemic, that it is still a key area for us, and we know it's important to be visible. And we're here to support our most vulnerable people and people with the most complex issues in a face-to-face environment. We're currently doing that at Central Library. We're shortly going to be offering a service at Todmorden, and we're planning to open the homeless prevention service at number 42 Market Street on the 12th of July. So those are all positive moves that we're doing to support people with face-to-face inquiries. We're obviously looking at other areas across the borough, depending on where the demand is. That might be a temporary thing where we just go where the demand takes us, or it might be that we have a drop-in once a month in certain areas. We're open to ideas and suggestions, and it'll really be where customers need us to be. We'll continue to lead the way on digital transformation, and we're working with ICT and services to keep improving the experience for those who want to and can go online. So I've mentioned the fly tipping and the street lighting and benefits form. We're currently working on improving the noise reporting form, and we're working on consolidating the council tax discount forms and improving the customer access for those. Another priority is about updating and communicating. So things that we're doing around that are making sure that we are talking to our residents in simple and clear language, keeping them informed using their preferred method of contact. We've already got some really good examples in place where customers are now receiving updates on their requests that they've put in, so they're not having to chase us. That they can choose, well, I would like to receive an email when there's an update, and that will happen for them. We will shortly be putting a text messaging service in so that customers can decide whether they want to receive updates by text, which is going to be make us much more accessible from that aspect. We really want to learn from feedback, so we do work closely with services on formal and informal complaints, and it's something that we really do monitor. The complaints team have regular meetings with senior management teams. We will join team meetings at an operational level, and we'll continuously learn from the feedback. Customers have various ways of feeding back to us, be it about the service, be it about our website, and we absolutely 100% look at each one of those and look at where we can improve and learn from that. And then we also want to treat everyone fairly and equally and with respect, and make sure that everyone who's contacting the council feels that they've had a valued and positive experience. We really want to promote an inclusive culture that removes barriers and ensure that everyone's got equitable access to help. So some examples of where we're already doing this is in the EU settlement scheme support. Although the deadline for applications is today, we expect to continue support in late applications for the next few months at the very least. We've been doing some really good early intervention work using trauma-informed practice techniques for customers who are difficult to reach and engage with. We're making sure that our web content is accessible and that our websites are properly designed and coded so that everyone using them can use them easily. And we work really closely with our interpreting team to assist customers who are in our deaf and hard of hearing community. To support some of these things, we've got agreement for some additional fixed term staff. And what that will do will give us opportunities to upskill existing staff, and that all of these things should hopefully reduce the wait time. So of course, this is just some of the things that the customer access teams are doing, but it's not just customer service teams that should be customer focused. It's the responsibility of everyone in the council, regardless of what role they're in. We all need to put people who live and work in Calderdale at the heart of everything that we do. So it's our intention that these priorities become everyone's priorities going forward. And we're going to be working with comms on how we embed these into the culture of everybody. So that's it from me. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, Tony. A difficult situation that everybody's in at the moment, just as a spin-off from COVID and so on. And clearly, people are doing a lot of work and working very hard at trying to improve and develop the service. However, we've got 1 or 2 people, I think, indicating. Did I see Susan indicating? Yes, and was it Dan as well?
Yes, it was. Yeah, this question will come as no surprise, I don't think, to Sarah, because when customer service was part of my portfolio when I was in cabinet, I was always keen and determined that we would still have face-to-face contact for. I know it's a minority these days, but in some of the poorest, I don't like saying the poorest, in some of the least affluent parts of Calderdale, you know, people don't have that much digital access, and there are certain communities where it isn't actually the norm. I know it may be the norm for, you know, but anyway. So what I'm asking, I suppose, I mean, you know, given everything that's happened, I know that, that COVID has really been quite transformational, the fact we're sitting here and so on, in terms of being great for access, but there will always be older people primarily, maybe not so in 20 years, but certainly for now. There'll always be older people, there'll always be people who are homeless, there'll always be people who need help who do not have digital access. And this follows on from what we were talking about a bit ago. So what is customer services doing to ensure that there is, you know, I wasn't quite clear what the provision was going to be for those who don't do stuff online.
That's one of my thoughts as well. Tina, do you want to come back on that, or Sarah perhaps?
I'll respond if that's okay. Yeah, we're absolutely committed, Councillor Press, to continuing with face-to-face support for those people that need it. We have three channels. We have a telephone channel, a digital channel, and we also have face-to-face, and we will continue with those. As Tony said, demand for face-to-face has been decreasing year on year for the last 10 years. And obviously with COVID, we had to cease the face-to-face contact altogether. But as soon as we possibly could, we reintroduced that via our library service. So we have bookable appointments there where people can come in and get support with basic inquiries. We also identified that there was a demand also for more complex and intensive support around homelessness advice and housing, which is why Tony's been working really hard with our colleagues to get number 42 Market Street up and running, where we can offer that service again. Because as you can imagine, trying to support people with issues around housing and homelessness over the telephone, it has not been an easy thing to do. So again, at the first opportunity, we're reintroducing that.
Good, thank you. I've got Brenda as well, but I'll go to Dan first, if that's okay, and then I'll come on to you, Brenda. Councillor Sutherland.
Thank you, Sarah and Tony, for your presentation, and for all the work your teams have done to keep the service running over the past year and a bit. Because in customer services, you know, the demand's going to keep coming in no matter what the disruption is to your staff team, and people just have to keep going. I know as a councillor, and I don't know whether my colleagues have experienced it the same, over the past 15 months, my email inbox fills up much quicker than it ever has. And I wonder whether part of that's people having a bit more time to write those emails, because they're not necessarily all been related to the pandemic. And also whether more people are actually, bearing in mind Councillor Presser's point about some people who don't have digital access, but that some people have broadened their digital skills over the past year. I know particularly a lot of people who are a bit older and would have said, I'm never touching a computer in my life, but when faced with isolation, they learn how to use an iPad and Skype and Netflix and a few other bits that really broadened their horizons. So I was going to ask, I mean, what do you see are the opportunities to sort of manage demand, help with the situation in terms of opportunities to transition things online where appropriate? I'm always a fan of things like live chat, but all the other areas where you can put things on. If I might indulge just a couple of quick questions on top. One is I often get remarks around the customer service line about it cutting people off after they've been waiting for a while. It has happened to me as well. I wondered whether we knew how or why that happens, or if we track it. And my last was about the mental health and well-being of the staff working in the service. So sitting on Zoom or Teams all day, which some of us may have to do, can be quite wearing. But generally in a meeting, you have a bit of time where you're not speaking, you're relaxing, you're having time to think. But in customer services, you're isolated, working from home, and having to basically be in a dialogue throughout the day. And sometimes that might be challenging dialogue, and it's not the sort of dialogue that your kids can suddenly pop up in the background for. So I just wondered how about the well-being of staff and what the future plans are to make sure that they get that peer support network, which is important for the delivery of the service, but also I think for the well-being of the people who work in it.
Well, that's a fair list, Sarah. Over to you.
Yes, so thank you for those questions, Councillor Sutherland. I think I'm going to hand over to Tony if we take them one at a time, Tony.
Yeah, that's fine.
Do you want to talk about the mental health of staff first of all, because I think that's a really crucial one, and I know you've been doing an awful lot of work around supporting the teams.
Yeah, so fortunately for us, we're quite a resilient team. You know, we pretty much take things head on, and we've experienced a lot of change over the years, so we're tough as old boots. So you know, we also were in a very fortunate situation that about 70% of the team already worked from remotely. So the other 30, it was only a case of it would have happened in time, and we were just sort of going through the motions of getting them set up. So it's kind of been ups and downs. With, you know, some staff have found it challenging, particularly when children weren't at school. But we've obviously just worked with the team to make sure that they can come off the phone and they can do things that aren't formulated. So some of the email stuff, the social media stuff, the chat things, there's things that they've been able to do on an evening and a weekend to make time up, so they haven't had to use their annual leave, etc. We do a lot more team meetings than we used to do before. We do a lot more one-to-ones than we used to do before. We worked really hard on getting the call coaching in, and something called call barging, which basically means that if somebody's got somebody on who's been particularly challenging or you know, frustrated, they can call for a team leader and they can literally join that call and even take it over if they need to. So there's all sorts of things going on that. We have been really fortunate. We haven't had many issues in terms of people really suffering with mental health. It's just been working with them around challenges about being at home, and they might not have the space to work in, or they may not have a nice environment. So just supporting them through that. But we've got 2 members of staff who currently work in Princess Buildings for one for mental health reasons, one for because they don't have internet, they don't have broadband, and other than that, on the whole, we do regular check-ins with all the team, and most people are very happy to work from home, but at the same time happy to come in and do face-to-face where that's required. On the second point, with regards to the phones getting cut off, you aren't the first person to say this. We have had IT look into it. We can't track it. We just can't pin it down, and it must be extremely frustrating for yourself and for customers if they've been waiting 20 minutes and then to get cut off. I have had it myself when I've been ringing other companies, and it's very frustrating. But all I can do is raise it again with our telecoms people and ask if there's anything else that we can do. I mean, the phones are connected to the internet because we work off a different phone system to the rest of the council. So whether there's some instability there or not that's not been identified, I just don't know on that. But all I can say is that we are aware of it, and we have tried our best to look into that and identify the root cause. But we're not quite there with that yet.
Thanks, Tony. I think I'll ask you to talk about digital transformation and chat a little bit. But just to say, Councillor Sutherland, I think really the flexibility and the support that's been provided to the frontline customer services by Tony and her team leaders has just been fantastic. We would fully understand that this has been a really challenging time for people, and so we're really appreciative of all their hard work dealing with the increased demand that we've had from customers. But things like the active Calderdale take 10 minutes, sort of things that we've introduced so people can get out and about and try and get some fresh air in between having calls dropping into your ear every 3 minutes. So yeah, it's a challenging time. Flexibility is the key, and listening to staff and hearing from them where we can help even more. Tony, just before we take another question, Councillor Evans, is it okay for Tony just to talk a little bit about the digital transformation stuff that we've been working on, and chat in particular?
I think that would be useful. I just want to tell members that I've got Brenda next, and Bob and Megan. I have noticed your yellow hands stood up, so I'm not ignoring you, but please carry on.
Yes, so as I touched upon, we are working really hard. We had a bit of a break for various reasons last year, but we're back on with the digital transformation now, and we're working really hard, like I said, to improve the experience for customers. So not only does that mean that we're working on the online forms, we're also working on the our web chat. As some of you might be aware, we are quite a pioneer in that respect, and we've led from the front in terms of chat nationally. We've been, the first one of the first in the country to implement it. Definitely one of the first in the country to implement it 24/7. We now have some automated chats and virtual assistants that can deal with some of the basic inquiries, and we're currently going through a migration to a better product that's a much more conversational, artificial intelligence. It's a much more sophisticated interface, so customers will have a much better experience and won't have to be as prescriptive and robotic themselves to say it is about council tax, and it can be a much more conversational thing. So we're really keen to get that on. That opens up other opportunities with customers being able to contact us through other social media and engage with chatbots. So all of these things in turn reduce demand on the team, and that in turn helps with their welfare and make sure that we're actually reaching customers that need to speak to somebody, albeit on the phone or face to face. You know, there is a big cohort of customers that do want to engage with us digitally, and we want to make that the best it can be. So we're working really quickly on bringing some of those things to fruition.
Thank you, Tony. Councillor Monteith, Brenda, you had, I think, a hand up at one point as well.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you. I'm interested in your first pledge on your screen that was about dealing with the situation at the first point of call, because that hasn't been the experience that I have had so far from residents who are raising issues with me that cover a number of different issues for the council, but do not cover a number of different issues for the resident. For example, where rubbish is not collected and it is then strewn all over the street, and then dogs or animals are devouring it, and then defecating all over the street as well, that seems to involve 3 or 4 different departments of the council. Whereas if your pledge to deal with it in first instance at the first point of call, it would be helpful if your staff could actually then coordinate those different referrals. From my experience, it's being referred on to several different departments, all of whom then respond back either to me or the resident. And it's not a coordinated response as far as they're concerned to what to them is just an issue about rubbish not being collected or being put out at the wrong time, and then ending up strewn all over their street.
Am I okay to respond, Councillor Evans?
Please do.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you, Councillor Monteith, 100%. And it's something that we can do better at. As a local authority, and as most local authorities, being a large organisation, those kind of things are the things that will always trip us up, where we've got different departments doing different parts of the service. But what we want to achieve is that our customer service advisors will be the advocate for the customer. So they will take on that issue, they will make sure that it's resolved to the end of the issue, and then keep the customer updated. So that's certainly what we're hoping we can do. That's our ambition, that's our aim, and just hope that we can get there.
Okay, thank you. We'll note that. Thank you very much. Bob, you have been waiting patiently, and then Megan. You're muted, Bob. You've had to wait so long. You see the switch is jammed. Shall I? Oh, there you go.
It's just mine, I think. And after saying that, I think it was Megan that was waiting before me.
My apologies, Megan, then.
No, but seeing it's, I might as well carry on then now. Start. Sorry, it wouldn't unmute. Now it is. Sorry about that. I just wanted to say, first of all, it is an informative presentation we've had this evening. I must know how, I mean, it's so challenging as this face-to-face role you have with the public, the work you do. So, you know, how much difficulty no doubt's been made over the last 15 months or so. And so thank you for the presentation. Just 2 points particularly I just wanted to pick up on. But one, you mentioned the issues regarding recruitment. And I just wanted to ask on recruitment, because whether this is a council-wide issue or just a particular issue in your particular services. I noticed, I think you said later that you were going to be adding some fixed staff, some additional staff, which sounds really good. But is this a West York? Is this a Calderdale issue in West Yorkshire recruitment? Is it not just happening over the last 18 months, but sometimes, you know, happen for some time where we lose out for staff because we're competing with the other larger cities around us in West Yorkshire? That's just a comment there, because I've come across, I think, mentions about recruitment from other areas. And the other issue, just to check, is there is there any way you get a performance monitor back from other authorities? I know how difficult it must be to measure and benchmark your kind of services where other authorities may have them slightly differently. Are you able to compare and see just how you're performing against other local authorities? And finally, you also mentioned the homeless prevention unit, I think it is, moving into 42 Market Street. I was really pleased to hear about that. And I'm assuming, I didn't know if I picked a date at when it was starting, but I'm assuming there's some ongoing publicity coming out, communications coming out about that in due course.
Thank you, Bob.
Pick up your first point around recruitment. And no, we don't have the same issues as some of our other colleagues across the council in terms of staff being poached because there's better wages paid at other local authorities, for example. But what we find within customer services is that staff come along and we recruit some really good staff, but they get trained up in all the areas of the council, and then other areas of the council take them on for higher grades, which is fantastic for them in terms of we using us as a springboard to then go on to bigger and better things that they're more than capable of doing. But the role that they take on within customer services is very complex, and the training from start to finish is not easy, as you can imagine. There's lots of areas that they need to learn. So whilst recruitment in our area is no different to other areas of the council in terms of the time it takes, it can take us up to 6 months to get somebody fully trained. And when we lose somebody who we've had for a number of years who's really experienced in council tax or in benefits, for example, we feel that really keenly when they go. But you know, that's one of the problems that we've got to deal with, and the team have got used to doing that over the years. But those are the challenges that we face, I think. In terms of performance, yes, we do have a really good performance comparison benchmarking group, which was operating prior to COVID, but they've not operated, I don't think, Tony, have they, during COVID? I know Tony's pushing them to try and get some more stats out, but I guess maybe everybody's struggling a bit like we are. Certainly up to COVID, we were doing significantly better than other areas in terms of the full-time equivalent staff we had and the number of inquiries that they were able to deal with, the times that customers were waiting, etc. So I can only assume that other local authorities have struggled the same as we have in terms of the additional workload that they've taken on during COVID and the additional demand from existing customers. And then finally, the homeless prevention service. Yeah, we're aiming to open on the 12th of July, and there's just a few technical operational issues that need to be sorted out first. And once we're confident with that date, then yes, we will certainly be promoting that. We're already talking to our partners to make sure that they're aware that that's our intention. Very much use the Burnt Bridges report to look at the things that were identified there as being good practice and looking to get other partners involved in delivering the service there. So it will be a more holistic service that will support people at very challenging times.
Thank you, Sarah. Megan, finally get to you.
Thanks, Ashley.
And then I've got Victoria to follow on, I think.
Can I say, excuse me, I'm eating mince. Can I say before I start that I've said numerous times, I admire what everybody's doing and, you know, really good. Okay, and, you know, you couldn't have had a harder time to work through. But it's also hard for counsellors. I mean, you go about your successes, but when you don't have success, it comes to a counsellor usually. And some of it, even if it's customer first, it's not necessarily customer first that lets people down. I've had at least one man this last few days who, I think who had spoke to somebody on customer first and said they were very nice, and they would put a note through however the system worked to get something from wherever waste is, etc. And he rang 3 times, and on the 3rd occasion the lady from customer first says, I'll go put it on his desk. And when that happened, the 2 notes were still on the desk. So when I say things are not all going right, I don't mean just with customer first. It's probably about, I don't know, 15, 20 years since I came on council, and I have to tell you, and it goes to what Councillor Brenda anyway, has said, we don't work between departments in a way that makes it good. We never have, and you know, I thought at one point it was getting better, but I don't think it is. And some of the things that people are complaining about are quite little. And there was one this week where Jill sent somebody to the person's house to talk to them, and they're over the moon. But to get that far, it took at least 1 email from me, 1 from Bob, and 1 from the MP. We shouldn't have to do that to get people the help that they need, and it wasn't even a big thing. So I know y'all work really hard, but I think there's something in the background somewhere that the powers that be are going to have to look at, so that we have confidence when we tell somebody something's going to happen, that it will happen. And I seem to have lost the ability to get responses to anything I put it, well, not anything, but a lot of the things that we send in. Okay, sorry about that, folks, but I'm not denying how hard you work. I'm just saying there's another side to it somewhere.
Thank you, Megan. Sarah, Tony, do you wish to come back on either of those, or just accept the comment?
I think what I would say is absolutely accept, Councillor Swift, that we know that when something's gone wrong and customers don't feel that they've had the service that they need, that they're going to get in touch with you. We know that your workloads are huge, and the last thing you need is somebody telling you that we're not doing our job right. I think that the council is significantly better than it was at joining up services, and we're always looking for opportunities. And our byline is that the customer shouldn't need to know which service actually does something and which service doesn't. That's our job. And when I spoke at the beginning about Tony working with their advisors to make them advocates for the customer, that's truly what we mean. We want them to make sure that they are the ones who are chasing up the response for the customer and getting that back to them, empowering them to demand the service that customers need from all of our service areas. As Tony said, customer service is not just for customer services. Everybody that works in local government is a public servant and should be delivering good customer service.
Thank you, Sarah. Councillor Porritt, Victoria, I think you've been waiting a while as well.
No, it's fine. Just missed the conversation. It's been really interesting. Thanks very much, Sarah and Tony, for updating us and bringing us so much information. Returning to what Susan was saying earlier about the face-to-face. I had a really interesting visit actually a couple of years ago to Customer First, to the main centre in the middle of Halifax, and seeing how that operates on all the different levels, obviously with people phoning, people emailing, but also people popping in, not just to inquire about council services, because as has already been mentioned, people don't necessarily know who can solve their problems, but in terms of joining up with other organisations and other services. I remember at the time there was Citizens Advice were there once a week for people to drop in, and I was referring people to that service from the food bank when we were able to do face-to-face there, and just really thinking in terms of the kind of vulnerable people that are turning up who just need help. How is that working face-to-face in terms of joining up with other services and other organisations? And also, how is that working within our communities and not necessarily just in the large centres in Halifax?
We've really turned on its head the way that we were operating prior to COVID. And now we're looking at opportunities to work with our partners from their locations or for other locations within communities So, for example, we've been delivering, as Tony said, the EU settlement advice that we've been funded to do out of offices at HOTS and at the Jubilee Centre. And we're looking at opportunities to work with Citizens Advice from their office so that we can give specialist advice around benefits and council tax and things like that. So whereas previously they were all brought into the centre to work with us, we're now dispersing to work with them in communities where people are.
Thank you, Sarah. Jacob, you wanted to come in, I think, on this one.
Yes, hi, thank you, Chair. Just wanted to ask what percentage of the current staff are working from home still, and what plans going forward exist for whether you're going to keep them there or bring them back to the office, as it were.
That's a big one.
So the majority of staff continue to work from home. Certainly all the telephony staff continue to work from home, and we have customer first staff now back into the libraries, and there will be number 42 as we need them. But there's no plans to bring the contact centre staff back into the office. As I say, the plan all along was for them to work from home so that we would have resilience at times like flooding and bad weather and all the rest of it. So that was the plan. It was just sped up considerably by COVID. Obviously, we are flexible, and where people have issues with childcare or with access to the internet, then we make arrangements for them to be able to come into the office and work from there. But the plan is that there will be home workers. As we've got other services within my area, so that our benefits assessment team, for example, they've worked at home for the last 13 years, and that's where they will continue to work.
Thank you. I think I'd like just to perhaps summarise.
Sorry, could I just?
Sorry, Susan. Yes, far away.
Sorry, just very quickly.
You stuck in.
Oh, I'm sorry. I saw.
No,
Is there somebody else?
carry on.
Yeah, it was just before you said. I mean, I was just slightly concerned to hear that, because you were saying earlier about that people have to learn skills and all kinds of things, and then they go somewhere else. Well, maybe if this is the case that they're working from home all the time, maybe one of the reasons they go somewhere else is because they actually want to, interact with people and have some social connection at work. And I'll be honest, I never realised that was the plan. Maybe I should have done. But surely, if people don't want to work from home, and it is the case that not everybody wants to sit. I mean, I can't think of anything worse than sitting all day, every day on the end of the phone. Getting difficult calls. I'm just expressing a concern there. And are you sure that is the correct strategy, given what you've been saying about high turnover? Because that doesn't surprise me if that's the scenario.
I am absolutely confident that that's not the reason why people are leaving Councillor Press. We don't have high turnover, but we have a reasonable number of people who will leave every year, every other year to go on to bigger and better things. And that happened while we were all based in the office. It's only the last 12 to 18 months that staff have been working from home from the contact centre. So nothing's changed there. And we ask them regularly for feedback. We have lots of one-to-ones and team meetings. And if they've got any issues with regards to mental health or anxiety around working from home, then they absolutely would share that with us. And we have had people who've shared that with us, and we've made alternative arrangements for them for a period of time. Because sometimes, depending on what's happening in your home life, working from home isn't a good thing. And we'll make alternative arrangements for them at that point. But yeah, I'm absolutely confident that working from home is not the reason why staff are leaving. In fact, it provides lots more flexibility for many of the people that work for us.
I think taking out of that, Sarah, that the flexibility is the important thing, isn't it? Because some people really do struggle in that situation. And as long as you're aware of that and you're doing something about it, I think that's going to help the situation. Councillor Cook, Jacob, you wanted to come back in, I think.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come back on that, because that was the reason I raised the question. There was just some concerns around it. It was just from the presentation. Tony said that people working from home, particularly new members of staff, didn't have that support system around them. So they weren't able to refer to a team leader or other colleagues when there was a difficult question raised. So that was my reason I asked that question, just concern around if there is a lot of new starters and a lot of staff getting trained up, and you say it takes 6 months to train them, what support is given to them to help them in a situation where they can't answer a question or they need to speak to a team leader? So what support is in place?
So it's certainly more challenging doing that remotely than it would have been when we were working in the office. But as Tony said, we've got some new software now that allows us to monitor calls and for team leaders to support if there's a difficult call, or for the advisor to put that call through to somebody else to pick up. So it mirrors what used to happen when we worked in the office. In terms of training, we do have face-to-face training available now. We didn't at the beginning because of COVID, as you can imagine, for social distancing reasons. But as relaxations are happening, we do have staff coming back into Princess buildings to do face-to-face training and seek advice. And the way that we train people is we do training so we train them on one subject at a time, make sure that they're fully confident with that, buddy them up with other people who've got more experience. And when we're confident that they're happy with dealing with those inquiries, then we'll move them on to something else. So that's why it takes 6 months. It's not that, you know, they're not fully competent by 6 months. Within a month, we'd expect our advisors to be competent in one area that they can then take calls on their own, and we build up that knowledge and that experience and confidence as we go through. I don't know, Tony, if there's anything else you want to say on that?
No, if there's a sort of a digital way of doing it, like you've said, you know, for the team leaders to give support and there's new software involved, I think that's a good idea. Obviously, these days you can do everything online, can't you? So I can't see any reason why you couldn't have a team leader listening into a call or, you know, giving the support in that way. So I just was interested to see, because it was highlighted as a problem in the presentation of working from home. So thanks.
Thank you. So I think we've given Sarah and Tony a fairly serious grilling on this one. Just a quick summary to say, I think clearly the majority of us are very much aware of the efforts that have been put in by Sarah, Tony and her team in terms of the difficult circumstances. And I think we have to thank them for that and the efforts they've put in order to achieve that. The other thing which strikes me about the presentation in terms of some of the data is the way that the formal complaints have declined, which is quite interesting given the circumstances and the difficulties which officers have faced in terms of all of this. I think that has to be a positive really in terms of the reduction in spite of all the pressure that's been going on. I think being the sort of critical friend, as it were, I think we do need to continue working on the development of the digital side, as was finally mentioned specifically there by Councillor Cook, and that we, at the same time, I think we're all aware that we do need to work on the face-to-face side of things and try and be very much aware of the mental health of the staff who are involved in all of this, who are our key frontline people. So I thank you for the presentation. I thank you for your patience and response to our questions. And I think we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Thank you. The last major item on the agenda is the corporate review of administration, item 7. Is it Nigel Warbend? Are you doing this one for us? Am I assuming correctly here?
Thank you, Chair. That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, I've got Donna Ward with me, who's the lead for business support. So if it's okay, Chair, I'll just go through quickly the summary of the report that you've hopefully had a chance to read. Yeah. Just then ask Donna if there's anything she wishes to add, and then between us, hopefully we'll try and answer your questions on it.
Thank you.
So I'll be relatively brief, and you're probably glad to know that we haven't got a PowerPoint presentation between us. But
there's nothing wrong with PowerPoint.
But in terms of the main points then, when I look back, actually, the last time that Scrutiny looked at the review of admin across the council was 2018, I believe, which is when we were actually in the midst of implementing the review itself. So it is quite timely to look at this again. So within the report, there's a bit of a reminder really about the main aims of that review. And I suppose primary amongst those was the fact that at that time, or prior to the review, we had every single service making arrangements for administration. The main aim, therefore, was to try and bring consistent.
Hi, Nigel, your sound keeps breaking up.
I had this problem last week, so I'll press on if that's okay.
Or you could go off video, which I think does help, does it, on this? If it's the sound that's a problem. Try it again, eh?
No.
No. It's worth a try.
Okay. So you can't hear me properly.
You're breaking up when you're talking. Do you want to just give it another try?
Okay. Well, I'll try again. If you can't hear me, then I think we'll resort to Plan B. So the report really was just setting out the review itself, and the main aims of it, which were about bringing a consistent approach. Can I just check? Can you hear me now?
Working at the moment for me.
Working at the moment. So I'll press on and just indicate to me if it's breaking up again. So say we did the review. We brought that in 2018, and in terms of the headline outcomes from that is we moved from something like 120 separate individual role profiles for staff to 7 generic role profiles. And one of the advantages of that was that it gave a very clear progression for staff in the business support service, that they could see the 7 steps through the particular service. One of the other savings that, one of the other benefits that I should add is that clearly this review brought some financial savings to the council. Initially, that was £500,000 per annum. In the latest budget council, it was agreed that that would be increased by another £150,000 per annum. So that review generated some financial benefits to the council. The rest of the report really kind of touches on the theme of most of the meeting this evening, which has been what's changed since March 2020. And in particular, it looks at some of the challenges, and the main one being the fact that around 130 business support staff suddenly had to start working from home. So they had to be equipped to be able to do that and to find new ways of working. So that actually provided some opportunities as well for the service to start to think about, how do we deliver services such as post, scanning, mail, etc. And as I say, it gave us that opportunity to make that change, which perhaps we wouldn't have had with quite the same ease before. In terms of the lessons that we learned over the last 12 to 18 months, the one I'd probably pick out is the fact that one size doesn't fit all. So when we talk about some of the more general processes, probably pretty consistent across the council. Each service has its own specific needs.
Hi, Nigel, you're breaking up again, sorry.
We got as far as one size fits all, I think. I got that.
Oh, it doesn't.
One size doesn't fit all.
Sorry, I missed that bit.
So what I was trying to say is that each service has its own specific needs, and that we have to tailor business support to meet that. And the final bit of the report is really about really just consolidating the improvements we've made in the last 12 months. I've noticed that
we lost the final bit of the report, I'm afraid, or I did anyway.
Hopefully.
But we have managed to read it. Do you wish to defer now to your colleague?
Yes.
Hiya, I'm Donna Ward, lead for business support. So I think, what Nigel tried to say there was the further actions and plans that we have, for developing the service further is to sort of continue with those consistent working practices where one size does fit all, because there are certain areas with post scanning financial processes that is consistent across all service areas. So, you know, creating more consistent working practices there, and then, you know, refocusing and working with the services to understand how we can deliver what they need, but at the same time, you know, within the constraints of our resources that we've got and the budget constraints that we've got on us. So, you know, we've made some really important headway over the last 12 months, and supported heavily by the fact that, you know, COVID and the pandemic has really made us have to put in new ways of working. But it's about, you know, making them consistent and carried forward, and realising those improvements and making them a more formal approach, even when we come out of the pandemic. I think it's important as well to note that the report sort of focuses on the challenges and improvements and changes that we've made since the review. But it's important to sort of note that we have continued to provide business as usual administration support for services. There are some areas that largely changed since the review brought it under one one umbrella, and you know, we've been able to sort of respond proactively to resource requirements, even with the budget constraints that we've, you know, of the savings that we've made, and we've been able to redeploy staff, you know, experienced staff, to areas where we've needed, you know, ad hoc support and stuff. So it's been, you know, it's you know, it's good to focus on the, you know, the positives that have sort of, you know, continued, that we have delivered business support consistently since the admin review was finalised.
Okay, Donna, well done, given the structure. Councillor Swift, I presume that's Megan Swift. You've got a question. You've got
yeah.
hand up.
I'm hoping the other one's going to make some tea, but you never know. Going back to when the review took place, it took forever. Good couple of years, didn't it? And you know, people were getting ever so touchy and stressed, and that went, I think, for Nigel as well, because he was really pulling his hair out on some occasions about what he was supposed to end up with. I think we've gone too far. I think you've only got to look at committee admin, etc. And, you know, I don't think it's fair that the council having committee admin staff, and I know they've probably not been told to do it, working at 9 o'clock at night and sending emails out, and, you know, things like that. And I just think we've cut too far. And what happens then is people go down with bugs, not the virus, and stressed, and they're absolutely worn out. And I don't actually think from memory that committee admin is that expensive. Okay.
Thank you. Do you want to respond to that, Donna?
So within, if we focus on committee admin for one, we haven't reduced the staff. We have got vacancies at the moment in there. So hopefully, you know, we're out advertising and interviewing for the vacancies that are in there to get the team back up to you know, what it was previously. But yeah, we have had some turnover of staff in the committee admin team, but eventually, you know, we would hope that we've got that that full quota of staff that's supposed to be there, and then be able to support those staff in that area.
Yeah, I am not complaining about what's happening. I'm just saying there are some there having to carry more than they should do, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you for that. Anybody else got any comments? I can't see any other hands up. One of the things that intrigues me is the... Sorry? One of the things that intrigues me is the reference to matrix management. I just wondered how this works from a performance point of view. For example, if there are two objectives to meet a customer and one which is service specific, how is this monitored and achieved in this circumstance? If there are two separate objectives, is this taken into account within the process?
Well,
does that make sense?
I think so, yeah. So basically at the moment, this is where Nigel mentioned that one size doesn't fit all. So in some areas it's straightforward. You know, we work with the services to make sure that, you know, that we're delivering what they need to support that customer. Because ultimately we're supporting the business to deliver whatever services they've got. So, you know, we're largely led by the service. So hopefully, you know, that we've got that communication. There is some areas where we do struggle with that, in that we've got the constraints of, well, we haven't got staff to provide that support, or we haven't, or for example, in terms of minuting meetings and things like that, it is a resource heavy process, is minuting a meeting. And during that time, you've then got the fact that the phones aren't being answered because that member of staff is in the meeting, minuting the meeting. So that then you've got the knock-on effect of then customers, service users saying they can't get through to the service. So it's about managing that priority. And again, it's where, you know, the best places where we are able to provide that support and effectively is where we've got a good link up with the service. And we're trying to, you know, develop that further by going to DLT meetings, service manager meetings, and creating that relationship. But most of the time, you know, it will be the service manager or your director that will dictate how we provide that service.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Bob, I think you were trying to get in, were you?
It's still on. I'm going to have to get him another button now.
Hello. You're still on mute, Bob, if you wanted to come in.
It's come up right. No, I don't know. I haven't had problems on mute for a long time. It just decided to have problems tonight. Just two areas which I think have run through as a bit of a threat from discussions tonight. But one of them, it has been discussed a minute ago, but on the problems with recruiting and people retaining posts, must be another concern. I heard what you said about admin and you're trying to recruit, etc. But I think I posed the question I asked earlier: is that a particular problem because of where we are, that you can't attract new staff in Calderdale because of problems, people working in other parts of West Yorkshire probably at more attractive salaries, etc., than we put forward. So I understand in your future, you do comment in 3.4, etc., that you are doing reviews in some areas on staffing, and I just wondered what kind of timeline you put in on that to see where that's coming from. And the other issue, which we've discussed before tonight, is digital. And under section 5, I think it's section 5 on the report, where you're talking about all the digital work that's ongoing. I just want to know just what the future is going to be, what future plans you have there again on that with staff remaining at home or partly coming back into the office, etc. And just how that's going to adapt for the future and your future plans.
So firstly, with the recruitment, we're not struggling to get people applying for posts. Where we're struggling to a certain extent is getting staff with the applicants with the appropriate skills that we need to meet the needs of the existing service requirement, being largely that sort of minute taker, answering phones and things like that, that administrators of today don't seem to have that skill. It's not a common thing that's promoted. So this is why going to the review of the role profiles, we're working with workforce development to look at how we can build something into the role profile that asks people who are willing to work towards a qualification. So then we can send people for the apprenticeship schemes in business administration, so that they can build on those skills, and then we've got those qualifications, and we can work with workforce development to put on in-house training sessions to develop those skills of our existing people, because when we are advertising for those posts, we're not getting the people at the right skill level. What I would say though is that the pay scale for our admin business support staff is quite competitive. If you look out in the organisations, private sector and everything, they're a good wage. They're not the top, but they're not the bottom either. So they are a good wage, and the fact that you get to move through various scales up to the top of a decent wage is quite useful. I think the main issue we've got is attracting people with the appropriate skills to hit the ground running and provide that specialist support that is expected in services such as adults and CYP, where they need someone with that real specialist administration ability. So
how do you see you're going to overcome this problem then? It sounds as though it's not an easy problem to overcome. So as Nigel mentioned, we have the role profiles that go from basic administrator to a specialist administrator, and then the executive support officers, so which are the specialist experience qualified to a certain extent administrators. So what we're hoping is that we can rework the lower role profiles to attract people who are willing to study and to qualify, so we can get people in at the lower scales, train them, get them with a qualification, so then they're able to apply for the more senior roles within the service, the more specialist roles, and we can see that they've got that appropriate skill level. And it's working even now. We've got quite a lot of staff within the business support function doing apprenticeships at various levels, and then they're empowered then to apply for the next stage up, and we've seen a lot of staff move through the services, so it is working, and it's it's getting people to stay with us, and actually as well people who know Calderdale Council and understand the processes and procedures of us as well, so it's really useful. So I think hopefully going forward that's only going to get better. In terms of the digital work that we're doing, so the corporate function, the post and scanning and all areas like that, we are working towards people doing a lot of scanning of post. So the post comes in from Royal Mail and we scan everything at source to the services. Now there's a lot of work we need to do, because at the moment we're scanning it to email account, email inboxes and things like that. So we can sort of streamline that process much more by utilising digital processes where we can actually just upload it to the system or upload it to a folder that people can access and then allocate the work appropriately. So there's all sorts of work that we're doing there, but it just means from if we utilise these digital mechanisms, it means that the services are getting the information, the post, quicker, because it's immediate. We can do it on the same day that it comes in, and we're not waiting for somebody to walk it over to a building. It's preventing data breaches because that piece of paper isn't being moved around the council, so it never leaves the building, and it just means that we can deal with that a lot quicker. Also, we're doing work with the services to send letters out so people can work from home, and then
send in letters that we then print at the town hall and put it straight into the post. What that means is that we can adjust the formats and things to realise the best postage costs, because we get business mail costs and things like that are cheaper than just normal mail. So we can, you know, make savings there. And we're working really closely with the services, you know, sort of the people that send a lot of post out, you know, like planning services, CYP and places like that send a lot of post out to, and will never, you know, reduce because of the people we're contacting, about, you know, sort of understanding the best way to format those letters to make it easier to send them out and, you know, utilise less paper and everything. And your final question about staff returning to the office. So we've done a lot of work on getting people able to work from home, getting the tech set up, getting the phone system set up so that they can take calls, because historically business support administration staff are the frontline people who are in the office enabling the services to work at home. So they're the people that should be in the office. So it has been a real sort of challenge to get people to work from home. And there are some staff within the business support function that once we come out of any permanent lockdown, that they will have to return to the office. So so we're working again with the services to understand how that's going to happen. We've been working with facilities management on their resetting of the buildings to make sure that there's space for people that need to be in the building. But also there's a wellbeing point sort of aspect to it, that some staff are nervous to come back, but then some staff want to come back. And so it's managing that and making sure that, you know, if staff can work from home, then obviously we will support that and promote that. But then we've got that opportunity to bring staff in to support other people to work from home. So, you know, we've been working with services and staff, and hopefully we'll get a happy medium of a bit of everything, really. But ultimately, we do have a lot of staff that need to be in the office. So, and we'll work towards and manage that appropriately.
Thank you, Donna. I think Megan, you were trying to get in as well on this one.
Yeah. Please don't take this as a facetious comment. But when a member's going to know what you're all deciding, because I've made myself a list tonight of things that are being worked on that I, as a councillor, have no idea whatsoever about. You know, and it's not the first time I've made this comment. Other people do it as well. So it would be good to know. I have something for the work programme that I think you'll have to make do with that in an email, Ashley.
Okay, yeah, point taken. Yeah, can't see any other hands though. Just a comment, the only comment really from me is clearly this is a work in progress. I think that's a reasonable statement to make. And perhaps we need to make sure as a scrutiny board that the right checks and balances are in place for such a big review as this one. Really, it's having quite major effects on the way we operate as an authority. And maybe what we should be doing also is look at this a bit more in the future, once it's had more time to embed, and then we can pick up on some of these queries we've been raising at this time. So I think we'll just make a mental note here, Lauren, that perhaps it's something we will look at in the future as well as it develops and as it moves further on. So any other comments from any other people, or can we thank Lauren and Mr. Ben as well, somewhere there? About your WhatsApp, not WhatsApp, your broadband situation, and we'll leave it at that. So thank you very much. And we move on to the final item now, which is the work programme. Lauren, did you want to just guide us through that?
I think, yeah, I'll be brief, but just to say there are a few items from the first meeting that we had around service priorities to build in. I'm sort of thinking around the staff wellbeing with human resources and obviously some of the finance items that are coming up. I've made a note of a few of the things tonight, so I'll send an email around and we can sort of get those built into the work programme over the coming days. Councillor Evans and Councillor Metcalfe are meeting with Robin as Chief Exec on Friday. So anything that comes out of that we'll share with you and we'll look to build that in. Just picking up on the point that Councillor Metcalfe made earlier around the work on elections, I think I've just had a brief scan through the minutes during the meeting and there was sort of a couple of choices around that. So whether we could do a mini sort of focus piece of work, a bit like a detailed review, or the other option is that we could ask for a report to come to this scrutiny board and members might want to consider making any recommendations to governance and business. I think that's one of the ways we can do that. So that's, yeah, I can leave that with you, and just anything that you want to add on or discuss, if you just send me an email or give me a ring and we can look at building that in.
I would echo the follow-up in terms of if there are particular areas that any board members are particularly keen on we look at, please let us know and we'll discuss things and build it in as we go along. Bob, did you want to add anything to any of that in terms of the work programme?
I hope not. We've done it.
Sorry, it's working again now. We've nearly come to the end of the meeting. No. If Laura's picking up some of the things that's already been more or less flagged up tonight, I've nothing further to add.
Good, thank you. Thanks, Lauren. So thank you, everybody.